when big things happen, it becomes really troublesome. Hello, and welcome to Therapy Notes 30. I'm your host, Dr. Elaine Malik. This is where practical psychology meets everyday living. This is a site where I talk about concepts, issues, topics that we hear in therapy. This is not meant to treat or diagnose anything, but is for educational purposes only. So come along and listen to some of the everyday things that we talk about in therapy. Today would be a good day to talk about adaptability. Adaptability is a interesting topic, and to kind of give you some context, when you are learning to be a psychologist and you're in grad school, you have to learn how to do IQ tests. And so you learn about the different measures that you use, you learn how to administer it and score it, you need to know how to write a report about it. And so a lot of people, both graduate students and the layperson in general, seems to think that IQ is a score that you get on a test that shows how smart you are. And that's true. There is a score we get, and we have it normed, and we can be pretty accurate in terms of that academic learning. The good news is that score isn't static, so you can change it, but that's not what this is about. The other thing, though, is that you learn that intelligence isn't just about an IQ score. It's and to write a report about somebody's intelligence, you need to take other things into account. And one of the things you need to take into account is this thing called adaptability. And adaptability, believe it or not, has a lot more to do with how successful a person is and how well they fare in everyday life than an IQ score. And we've heard people say, he's book smart, but he doesn't have any common sense, if you've ever heard that phrase. And that's kind of getting to this thing called adaptability, but we want to be thinking about adaptability as something that is crucial to everyday functioning and really a person's ability to kind of have the best quality of life. And so I wanted to really just kind of touch the surface. I mean, there's so many components to adaptability that this is only going to be just a brief kind of discussion about why that's so important. So adaptability is really a person's ability to be flexible and resilient. And resilient is another topic that is pretty complex, but enormously powerful in terms of how a person's life turns out and how they manage things. So adaptability has a lot to do with flexibility, cognitive ability, flexibility, emotional flexibility, behavioral flexibility. So what do I mean by that? Let's kind of get into an example so that it starts to have some relevance. So let's take a simple example, just something basic that might kind of bring it to the surface. So say that a couple who had been renting had decided they wanted to buy a home, and they were searching, they were looking, and they finally found a house, and they loved this house. They just loved it. It was the perfect house for them. The price was right, the neighborhood was wonderful, all the features in the house that they wanted, they had. And they were trying to decide whether they wanted the house or not. The only real downside was that it was 45 minutes away from their house. And they'd been renting near their work, and so they had gotten accustomed to driving 10 minutes to their work. And so this was a real feature that was going to change for them. They were going to have to drive, or one of them were going to have to drive 45 minutes both ways every day. And so a person with a low adaptability score might get stuck. They might be unable to know what to do. Their ability to be flexible in this situation was so limited that they just can't pull the trigger. They can't say, we want the house. And so they just sit and spin about how this drive would be just so far, and what if there was an emergency, and what if this happened or that happened, and they just became sort of overwhelmed with this downside of buying this house, and they just got stuck. And unfortunately, someone else got the house, and they weren't able to get the house. That's a low adaptability score. That's an inability to kind of be flexible in their view of this situation that wasn't all positive. There were some negatives to it. So how would a person with high adaptability approach this? How would they do that? They want the house, they love the house, they think it's awesome, but they have this issue of this drive, which is not 10 minutes anymore, it's 45, which is a substantial amount of time to spend in traffic. And so the person who has a high adaptability score says, how? How will I cope with this? How will I manage this? What would be some ways to mitigate, reduce, maybe not eliminate completely the downside, but find a way to mitigate it or reduce it? So the person may say, well, maybe I can see if I can work from home some of those days. Maybe they do have a job, they can do that. If they don't, they might say, well, maybe I can find somebody in that community. It's a great community. Maybe there's people I can carpool with, right? So I don't have to drive every time. If the gas price and everything was the issue. Maybe, I've often sat at home drinking my coffee, scrolling on my phone before I left for work. Now maybe I'll use that time to do some educational audio or podcasts. Maybe I'll listen to podcasts on my way to work and way home. So I actually am using that 45 minutes for something constructive. Before I was doing almost nothing. Another person might say, well, you know what? I used to eat at home. I used to eat, breakfast at home. I'm going to leave a little bit early. I'm going to grab a yogurt and a banana and some coffee. And when I get to work, I'll sit at my desk for 10, 15 minutes to eat my breakfast. So, the time that I would have spent at home making breakfast, I can now be on the road and on my way to work. Some people may say, well, I might leave a little bit earlier, get to work. Maybe I can leave a little bit earlier as well. And then I'm missing some of that traffic. So you see how a person with high adaptability score, they kick into, what can I do with this circumstance? How can I approach this circumstance to reduce its negative effect on my life and get the best out of life, get the best out of my choices, right? There's another bigger issue that I think relates to this issue of adaptability. And like I said, there's a lot to unpackage there, so I'll probably do several videos on adaptability, because when we have a low adaptability score, the rigidity in people's minds about what has to happen to be okay gets in the way over and over again. But one of the things that makes this even more troublesome is if you're not a person that's practicing adaptability on small things. My neighbor buys a dog and, this puppy is just barking constantly. Well, if I can't adapt to that, if I can't get used to that, those small practices with being adaptable, practicing kind of stretching outside of what you want, when big things happen, it becomes really troublesome. For most people who are happily married and are moving along through life, there's a recognition that at some point, one of them is going to pass. And if you have had difficulty adapting to very small changes, when something big, like the loss of a spouse or something even more tragic, there's a economic downturn and we are really struggling economically, adapting is not being able to adapt is going to create so much more mental health issues, emotional issues, difficulty adjusting to hardships that may really be struggling, cause a struggle. So adaptability is a skill and something you can grow. I mean, you can change your IQ score, as I said earlier. You can change that. But maybe the best thing to do is focus on becoming more adaptable, having more mental and emotional and behavioral flexibility, switching out of I don't like this and I can't tolerate to how problem solving. How can I deal with this? What can I do to make things better for myself? What actions can I take? Even if it's I'm just going to change my frame, my view on things so that some of the difficulties in life become easier for me to manage. That's kind of the benefits of having a high adaptability score. So that's adaptability. Like I said, it's real basic. There's much deeper topics that relate to this, but this gives you an idea of what the importance of adaptability is. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you found this informative. If you have some topics you'd like me to discuss, please put them in the comments below. Until next time, I'm your host, Dr. Elaine Malik.